Yo, everybody. So a couple of things today. First of all, you may notice a little bit of echo in the video today, and that is because we are largely moved out. All you can see over there is my desk. Anyway, hopefully this gets set back to where it was before so we can see the show. Oh no, I made a mistake. What I wanted to do today was start out by showing some vintage archive footage from the early days at Infusionsoft, just in case you don't believe that I was there back then. So now, one thing I will say, I mentioned on Friday that Clint got a hold of this camera that I had bought and went kind of nutso with it, so we're gonna see a little bit of that. That's TJ. Here's some more archive footage.
There really isn't any other way to do it.
This is a good one. It's one of my favorites.
It's a video, you idiot.
Oh man, I have to splice some of this footage in to the final version today. Hang on. I apologize. With the moving, there's dust and things in the air. Anyway, welcome back everybody. Happy Monday to you. I am excited today, as per the usual. There's a lot of fun stuff that happened back in those days, and you know, you can see from the footage we had started to grow as a company. And there was a lot of things that that started to shift, not shift necessarily in like a changing of direction way, but just sort of get more solidified. Because I think as we grew, we started to realize that there was a culture. When it was just the 7 of us in the early days, and by the way, since I posted some of those videos, it has been brought to my attention that the status of employee number 7 is actually not mine, because there were some people that came and left, and then there was some shifting and some shuffling and all these other things. Whatever. A lot of things that happened back then, and as I mentioned at the time, I was 18, 17, so my brain was far from fully developed. Anyway, when it was just us, it was mostly just family. I mean, it was the 4 of us were brothers, and then a brother-in-law, and then Tara, who might as well be family. And then a couple of other people that we had brought in, and in the early days it was just work. You know, it was just a more comfortable work environment than what I was doing before, and I was excited about it. I was thrilled about it, but we didn't exactly have we hadn't established a culture at that point. But as we started to shift, and as we started to grow and bring on more people, and we brought on Clint, and we brought on, you know, TJ, and then the Leavitt brothers, and then Aaron Halderman and Cody and all these other people, as we started to really grow, that core group of people became, we started to develop more of a culture. And I think the important thing to realize is that the culture that we developed in those early days was not a culture that we imposed on anyone. It wasn't like, here's the culture, let's write it all out, and then when you come in, you are part of this culture. Right, and you have to sort of adopt the cultural norms of what we have. Now, admittedly, most of us back then shared enough demographically that it was fairly easy for us to find a similar culture. We kind of all fit together. Most of us were white dudes in the early days, and that was not a factor of the hiring process. We weren't only hiring white Mormon dudes from Arizona. Those were just the people we knew at the time. And as we brought everybody in, we started with the people that we actually knew and were close to, and then expanded from there. And I know that Infusionsoft over time has made a big push for not only expanding that culture, but also expanding with diversity and things like that. But in those early days, the culture, the point that I'm making is the culture that we had grown into was one that was just a natural culture of the people that were there. And it wasn't like everybody that we brought on fit immediately, because we had a good amount of people that came through the support department specifically that burnt out, that like cycled themselves out because they didn't fit in with the culture that we had established. And it wasn't like we edged them out and we like said, okay, you got to go because you don't fit, you're not one of us. It was more that they realized and we realized that it just didn't work. It wasn't a fit. And I think that was the beginning for Infusionsoft of really owning up to and leaning into the idea of culture. And for better or for worse, I know that there's been some complaints over time about the culture being too vanilla and too one-dimensional. I don't think that that's what naturally happens when a company grows. Is you have to establish the culture and the norms of the original team. And it's incredibly difficult as you start to expand beyond those. I mean, those of us that were there, for lack of a better way of putting it, we had a very limited set of experiences because we'd all sort of lived a similar version of the same life. Just because of our background and our history and what we'd done. And so that the culture in the early days, I think, got a toehold just by nature of who we all were. And I think that's very important because it helps people to realize that culture is not something you can manufacture. I don't think it's something you can just say, this is what we do here, and so therefore you have to do it. And it becomes very difficult as the company grows. I mean, you think about, so Infusionsoft is what, 600, 750 employees now. You think of larger companies, Google and Facebook and these types of companies. The culture, the larger the company gets, the more diluted the culture has to become because it has to be inclusive, right? And so when we first started at Infusionsoft, we had a very specific thing that we're going after, and it required people that were willing to put in long hours. It required people that were willing to have a good time and be able to, kick back and not freak out the fact that we were going to play Counter-Strike on Fridays, but also be legitimately dedicated to what we were trying to build. And so the building of that culture, I think, was incredibly important. And like I said, we had some people that came through that didn't fit with the culture. And it just so happened that the initial culture of Infusionsoft was being excellent at what you do, putting in the work, and not, for lack of a better term, lollygagging, right? And there were a few people that came through the support department that didn't match up with all those things. I remember we had a couple of people that came through, and it was almost like they weren't willing to work. They weren't willing to put the time in, or they weren't willing to expand or grow themselves. And so I think, in the early days, especially as you have that established culture, it can be difficult to then expand the people that are working for you because you're trying to expand out beyond the demographic that you've been sticking to. And you don't always get it right the first time, right? And so I think that was a very important thing. But more so than just the culture and the way that it grows, I think one of the things about that time was realizing that the culture can supersede a lot of other more traditional approaches to things. Like, so I was 18, about to graduate from high school, and when I started my senior year, which is right a little bit after I started at Infusionsoft, it occurred to me that I had not taken a physical education class in high school yet. Like, I just got to my senior year and hadn't registered for one, and I didn't register for it my senior year, and I got 3 months into my last year of high school and realized, oh man, I'm not going to graduate if I don't take PE. But I'm not taking PE, so what am I going to do? And so I registered for an online course. Essentially, it was exercise keep track of your exercise, and then it'll count that. I did one class through the local community college and one class through the university that I ended up going to, just to get credit for having done a PE class. It was interesting because I played sports, so I think I kind of just assumed in the back of my head that playing sports was going to cover my PE credit need, which it did not. And so anyway, I had these online classes that I was supposed to be taking, and it was one of those like self-paced type things where you keep track of stuff and you manage yourself, so to speak. Well, I got halfway through the year and hadn't started, and needed to. Suddenly, I had all this exercise that I needed to do in a very short amount of time, and I figured out, and this. Looking back, this probably was not the most honest way of doing this. But looking back, I realized I could exercise and count it for both. And since they're not going to talk to each other, they won't know. So I was like, okay, it's fine. I'll just do 2 semesters worth of exercise at once. Well, what ended up happening was, in order to do that, the number of hours that were required, I had to, oh man, this is ridiculous. I had to bike to school. And we had actually moved. So we used to live half a mile from the school, and then we moved about 8 miles east of the school. And so I had to bike to school in the morning, which in hindsight, even 10 miles biking is not very far. But for somebody who didn't really want to be doing that every day, it was quite a bit. And then I had a half day as well. And so what I would do is after school, after my half day was done, in high school, I would go and I would run 6 miles, and then I would go to work. Well, it got to the point where I had so much, I needed to do so much, and I was too tired, and I wasn't getting the right amount of stuff done, and it was just too difficult. Got to the point where I was like, okay, I need to have a conversation and figure out how I can make this work with work. And I knew that it came down to about a week's worth of additional exercise that I just needed to put in. And so I went to Brad, and I have to thank him forever. Brad at the time said, I was like, hey, let's figure something out. Is there something I can do for a week or something where I can just take time away and go do this because I need to figure this out? And it became a sort of a running joke at the time, and has continued to be, but I've sort of been the brunt of a lot of jokes, I think, so I'm kind of used to it. But it became, because I think about that time, or a little bit before, Third Eye Blind had come out with that song, Will I Graduate, or whatever. And so I didn't know it at the time. I didn't even know the song, but they all would sing that to me when I would come in. Anyway, he said, listen, I'm going to give you a leave of absence. And I can't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks or what it was. It wasn't a very long time, but it was go get that thing figured out and then come back. And I think at the time, Brad understood, and I think the rest of the team understood, that having the right people that culturally understand what you're trying to do and that get it was more valuable than a lot of other things. And so they were willing, and also at the same time was a brother, so I'm sure he was just trying to be helpful and everything. But I also see a value culturally in helping people to achieve what they need to achieve, right? That was a need. I wasn't going to graduate high school if I didn't do that. And so he saw that as an opportunity to let me do what I needed to do, which I thought was incredibly valuable. But again, the crazy thing is then, about, 4, 5, 6 months later, maybe, right after I think I had graduated, or I was right about to graduate or something, it was the spring-ish, about the spring of 2005, I had a friend who said, hey, you should come and check this thing out. There's this opportunity to make even more money. And I was making decent money at the time, at least I thought, and working a lot of overtime. And in fact, this was right as I graduated, so I was working full-time now and get a lot of overtime. And this friend of mine said, hey, you should come check this out. There's this new company that's coming through, Vector Marketing. You should come check it out and see what's going on. I knew nothing about Vector at the time. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You know where this is going to go. So I went and hung out with this guy for a day. I went and I did some research on it, and it turns out Vector is the company, the marketing company that employs, not really employs, but that deals with and services the salespeople for Cutco, so the knives. And so I did a little bit of research on it, and this was my first introduction into MLM, to network marketing, multi-level marketing. And the whole thing, it made sense, right? It made sense to me that in my young brain, well, you come in, you can sell a product, or you can get people, you recruit people to your downline, and then when they sell product, you make a commission off of what they sell. And I was like, oh, okay, well, in theory, I could make a lot more doing this. And at the time, I had a very large sum of money that I was supposed to save for this mission, so that I could pay for it. Anyway, so I went to Brad and I said, hey, I'm interested in like trying this out, checking this thing out. What do you think? And he said, well, you can, go see, figure it out. Go see it. Go look and see. Go to their training or whatever and see what you think. So again, I'm pretty sure he actually gave me some time off again to go and check it out. I went and I got really close. Actually, I went through the whole training. I could sell you Cutco knives, by the way. I know why they're so valuable. I actually had a set of Cutco knives for a long time. Got rid of them because I only ever used the chef's knife, and it was a $1,000 block of knives. And I was like, well, maybe I don't need a $1,000 block of knives just for the one. And so sold them, and now I don't have any knives, and I'm realizing the error in that particular situation. But anyway. But I thought it was very important from a company culture standpoint. And again, looking back, I can't say with any degree of certainty why exactly he was okay with me doing that. I like to think, looking back, part of it was trying to let me figure out what I wanted to do and all this kind of stuff. But also I think part of it was realizing that the way that a company is going to grow with its employees is by taking their employees, like what's important to their employees, and making that important to the company. In my case, I was stupid and I didn't take PE early, and then I sort of wanted to feel out this network marketing thing. But the fact that they were okay with me going that direction and trying it out and just seeing what would happen, and taking time away from the company, I think at the end of the day, it was important to realize that I understood that they had my back. And that eventually was the reason why I ended up staying. Because it was very clear that with Vector, I was not going to be part of a team like that. I was not going to be part of not that there's anything wrong with that. I know plenty of amazing people that do network marketing, and they're great people, and they build teams, and it's very lucrative. But I was more into the culture that was starting to develop at Infusionsoft and I think that the fact that they let me go do that is what solidified my connection to Infusionsoft over the long term. So I came back and I put all that stuff to rest and continued to work, and we kept building up the support team and the training team, and that was when TJ, I think I mentioned this, TJ Lorenzen, Halderman, Cody I mentioned already, the Leavitt brothers, both the Leavitt brothers, Clint was there, and as we started to just build out that team, Jordan Hatch showed up. Actually, Jordan Hatch came and left. He did one kind of like what I did. He came and left and then came back again later. But as we started to grow that team out, that became the initial culture of Infusionsoft. That's where the culture came from. Jared Morris was another one that came on at that time. And we built it out, and we created and fostered that culture because it was healthy, right? A lot of people, I know that there's been some, like I said, there's been some flack around the culture being too one-dimensional, but it's a healthy culture that they developed back then. And, you know, maybe the specific values aren't totally shared across the board. Maybe I don't share the specific values of every member of that core team now, but I feel like if I was to go back, if I could make a decision of what company culture I wanted to work in now, if I was going to go back to a company and work, it would be early days Infusionsoft. Because we all had the same thing that we were working towards, which was we're trying to build this thing. We don't really know what it's going to be, but we're just working towards that same idea. And in fact, I think, interesting little side note, I think it's that phase of business that's really exciting to me. The early days where you don't really know what you're trying to do. You're just kind of trying to build it out. I remember there was the same thing at 6th Division, and plus this as we were trying to build those companies out. Not really knowing what it was going to turn into, and trying to make it into what we wanted it to be, without overdoing it. And so, you know, I think that's important. And by the time I left Infusionsoft, the first time, which would have been October of 2005, when I left Infusionsoft in October 2005, it was more like saying goodbye to family than it was anything else. And I knew that there was a group of people there that had my back. In fact, I remember, I'll close with this. I remember several times in those early days, I had a personal connection with those people. Like, they were giving me relationship advice. I had a girl that I was seeing before I left, and it's a very dramatic thing for a Mormon that's about to go on a mission, has a girlfriend, a whole series of things. Anyway, and so I knew that there was a group of people that were like family to me. And that never actually changed. Those people, I still feel the same about those people. And I feel like that connection, that cultural connection that we developed back then was incredibly important. Because most, if not all, in fact, I'm pretty sure that all with very few exceptions of those people are still in the space. We're still connected to Infusionsoft. We're still connected to each other. And I think that's valuable, if nothing else. So if I guess a lesson you could take from that little anecdote, little story, is if you're building a company, you're trying to build something out, culture is something that organically grows from who you are as a company, from who you are as a CEO, because the company is just an extension of you, and you want to find people that have that can get along already. You don't have to force into trying to do something else, and that then grows organically into a larger thing. And the thing is, you have to understand that there are certain tenets of that culture that you espouse early on that are not necessarily directly connected to the culture itself, but rather preferences that maybe you and the core and first core team tend to share, and that's why you guys come together, because you have the same sort of ideas. And so finding out what the core philosophy of your culture is, what it is that really binds you all together, and then starting to pare away some of the little things that can be divisive, some of the things that can be alienating to other people, and realizing the core of company culture is the mission. It's what you're trying to do, and it's not all of the ancillary things. It's not like, it's not all of the individual pieces and like it's not the dogma of it. I don't want to go into the religious thing, but it's not the dogma of your culture. It's the core principle of your culture. And then as you start to pare away a lot of the little things that can, like I said, can be alienating, you start to attract more people to what's true, what's the core culture. And like I said, we didn't know what we were doing back then. Clint actually probably did. He may have done it on purpose. I have a feeling that he did, but I had no clue what was going on. But 15 years later, we still share that same camaraderie. And I'm pretty confident that if I was to go reach out to all 10 of those guys, or however many, 9 or 10 of those guys that were there in the early days, and say, hey, let's go in on a project together. Let's build something. I think they would all be in. Just because we have that connection, we have that core commonality. So anyway, I'm excited. I think I'm going to start releasing some more of that old vintage archive footage. That was about 10% of what I've got. I got a lot of stuff. Clint went kind of nutso with that camera back then. So there's a lot of good stuff that'll be coming out. Documentary style about the early days, which I'm excited about. Tomorrow, I think I'll go into the end and when I actually left, and my, what happened when I actually left, and then starting into when I came back and what led into me coming back for the first time. Later today, just to keep you aware, later today a video is getting, actually I think it's already up. There's a video that is released on my blog and also on my YouTube channel talking about how entrepreneurship is like training for a fight. There's some fight footage, as well as a lot of things that tying business and fighting together, which I think is really exciting. So check that out. I will link to it from this post as well as from all the other posts. As always, check me out, brettmartineau.com. You can check out the blog. Everything is there. Facebook, Brettward James, at Brettward James. Twitter and Instagram, at Brettward James. I'm on Medium. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the places, wherever you prefer to watch that stuff. And then the podcast episode will come out on Thursday. So I think as an outro, let me just grab another video real quick, because this is fun. I mean, why not, right? Let's just find another good one. Cody, no, that's me. No. Dun, dun, dun. Here's a good one. This will give you a good idea of how crazy this was back then. I should have just started every one of these live videos with one of these because this is incredible. Anyway, peace out, y'all.